Interested in some thoughts on using AI for CELTA in your assignments? If you have anything to do with the CELTA course and you scroll away at this point, I'm amazed. That's got to be my best hook ever. I'm Jo Gakonga. I'm a teacher educator. I've been a CELTA trainer and assessor for over 20 years. I've also got a website at elttraining.com where I make video-based support material for English language teachers at all stages of their careers. Check it out, and if you like this, give me a thumbs up and subscribe. I make a new video every week. This is an introduction to a short series on using AI in CELTA, and I'll be making the same disclaimer on all of these videos in the series. Cambridge English have so far put out very little guidance for centres on how AI can be used by trainees. So the first thing you should do before you use any of my ideas for using AI in CELTA is to ask your tutor what the policy is for your centre and follow what they say. If you've done that, keep watching. The official guidance that Cambridge has put out can be found in the link under this, but the main thrust of it is that AI generated content from tools such as ChatGPT or Gemini is acceptable for CELTA and Delta modules 2 and 3 for the following reasons. Number one, to generate ideas for teaching and learning materials. Number two, to carry out initial research into preparation for an assignment. And number three, to generate a bibliography for further research. As far as we're concerned on a CELTA course, you're not expected to do much in the way of further research. So that last one really applies to Delta. In any case, bibliography generation needs to be treated with caution in my experience, as both ChatGPT and Gemini are apt to just hallucinate. At best, they don't give the most helpful sources available, and they often just make things up. Eric is a better source here if you are looking for research. The main issue that Cambridge are concerned about in their guidance is that all sources, including AI sources, are properly cited. So this is clearly essential, as it is for any source that you use, whether it's books or the internet or AI. Cambridge give a couple of examples of how this could be done in their guidance, and it looks like this. It's worth noting here how you can add a reference from AI tools. Make sure that you're starting a new search every time you use it, and when you've finished you can just find the share button here on ChatGPT and here on Gemini to give you a link. It's also a good idea to copy the answers that it gives you. You can use this button here on ChatGPT or here on Gemini so that you can prove, if you were ever asked to, the results that you got. You could also take a screenshot if it's a single page of material. However you do this, keep it somewhere safe. In their guidance, Cambridge do give leads to a couple of other sources that it's worth knowing about, the JCQ guidelines and the NILE guidelines. And you can find links to those underneath here too. And they both have useful things to say about AI. The JCQ says students must ensure that work submitted for assessment is demonstrably their own. If any sections of the work are reproduced directly from AI generated resources, those elements must be identified by the student, and they must understand that this will not allow them to demonstrate they've independently met the marking criteria and will therefore not be rewarded. Basically, you can't just cut and paste and get credit for it. That seems pretty obvious and reasonable to me.
Boink. 的
The message is the same with Niall. AI is used as a tool to support the development of information. The participant, however, maintains a critical analysis and contextualisation of any information so produced in the same way as they would for any other materials, and are transparent in the processes they've followed. So the message across the board is clear. AI tools can be useful, can be used in CELTA, but you need to use them in a critical way, not just cut and paste, and you need to be open and honest and clear about the way that you've used it. So the bad news, if you're watching this video because you hoped I was going to tell you the secret prompt to put into ChatGPT or Gemini that would generate a perfect assignment, I can't do that. And to be honest, I wouldn't if I could. But the good news is that as we go through these videos, I'm going to show you how you can use AI tools effectively to give you enormous help with your assignments and, more importantly, with your teaching life in the future. So buckle up, let's go. You can see a walkthrough of this assignment here, but a brief overview is that you take a text. In some centres they'll give you one, in others they'll ask you to find an authentic text that you like, such as a newspaper article. You have to do some research into receptive and productive skills development, and then say why the text is suitable for your learners and devise appropriate tasks for developing receptive skills, that's reading and listening, and productive skills, speaking or writing. Let's look at these things one by one. With this task, you need to do some reading around skills development and cite this, and it's still important to do this in the old-fashioned way. Look at some of the books recommended by your centre and find out more about receptive and productive skills to give a rationale for your tasks. This background will also give you a better ability to do what I keep saying is important and critically appraise the tasks that AI can produce. I'm going to work on the assumption that you're dealing with a written text. You could do the assignment on listening text, but it's easier to show with the written words, so let's stick to that here. Here's the example I'm going to work with. You have your text and you want to see if it's appropriate for your learners. If you want to know what the level of the text is, you can paste it into Vocab Kitchen and it'll tell you how difficult the vocabulary in the text is. You have to be a bit careful with this. It'll give you an idea, but it's not perfect because it only deals with single words. And vocabulary is made up of more than this. For example, look is an A1 word, and so is up and to. But look up to means something different, and it's B2 level. Putting the text here in Vocab Kitchen will also help you to pick out any vocabulary that you might need to pre-teach. Remember, you can't pre-teach everything they're not likely to know, especially with an authentic text. So aim for anything that will block their understanding of the whole text and anything they need to know to answer the questions that you ask. You can ask AI to pick out words for you, but it doesn't do it so well. With this, it tends to choose too much vocabulary and it's often not needed, or it would be known, frankly. So here's an example from ChatGPT. At B1 level, I would definitely expect that smoker, mobile phone, extra life, shave my head, achieve my goal would all be known. And the only word here that's really important to understand the text is uninhabited island. So you could ask for words to pre-teach, but treat the list it gives you critically. Let's look at reading skills next. You'll probably need to devise a task for reading for gist and another for reading for specific information. Gist first. Gist tasks aren't easy. You want something that makes sure that learners have an overview of the whole text, but how do you do this without asking specific questions? If you put in the text and ask Gemini or ChatGPT to give you a gist task, they don't do it very well. They'll give you a list of comprehension questions, but that's not what you want. You could give learners the title of the article and ask them to predict the content, maybe in pairs, and then elicit some ideas from them, and then they read to check. You don't need AI for this, but it won't work with every text. Can you see the problem in the case with this task? Smoker to spend month alone on tiny Scots Island in bid to break cigarette habit. The title tells the whole story. There's actually no need to read at all. How about a couple of other ideas that AI can help you with? Here we go. Remember, you have to be critical. The first one is to give your learners 3 different titles so that they read quickly and decide which is the best. You can, of course, make these up, but AI can take the back work out of it, leaving you to critically choose between the ideas it generates. I put the text into ChatGPT and asked it, give me 3 possible titles for this article. 1 should be good and 2 should be bad titles, and this is what I got. If you don't like these, just ask for more. Now, decide which 2 of these 4 are the best or the most plausible for your learners, and use these with the good title for your gist task. I asked Gemini to do the same with much less successful results. In this case, the AI gave me titles that were less good, but still appropriate. As with all things AI, the important thing here is to try out different tools, different prompts, and don't be afraid to be critical and edit the result. A second gist task could be to give the paragraph subtitles and ask the learners to match the mixed up titles with the paragraphs. Again, in this case, ChatGPT gave me a pretty reasonable set of subheadings. You can see them here. But Gemini's were too complex, and in one case just factually wrong. Cold showers aren't mentioned in the text at all. Let's move on now to comprehension questions. AI can generate questions that require an overall understanding of the text and reasonable true-false questions, including answers. Just ask it. There are 3 main issues to watch out for though. Issue number 1, it doesn't differentiate questions that can be answered from real-world knowledge. Issue number 2, some of the questions it generates will include language that can just be lifted from the text, maybe without being understood. And issue number 3, language grading. You can ask it to make the language simpler, but to be honest, it's easier just to edit it yourself. With all of these, a useful way forward is to ask for more questions than you need. So ask for 15 if you want 10, for example, and then use the best ones. Just weed out the ones that have issues 1 and 2 and edit any of the others to make sure that the language grading is okay for your class. In your assignment, you want to explain how and why you did this. So that's the receptive skills side of things, but what about tasks to develop productive skills, speaking and writing? AI does a good job of this. I asked it for 3 speaking activities that would be useful from the topic of the text, and I got these 3, all of which I feel are useful and relevant. So your job here is to critically decide which would be the most suitable for your learners based on their age, their ability, their interests. You might also want to include how you would set the activity up. any potential difficulties there might be with it. For example, with the language needed or the setup, classroom management issues such as, I don't know, more confident learners dominating the talk, for example. This language-related task assignment is the one where you have to analyse grammar, vocabulary and functional language for teaching purposes. And it's often the one that candidates worry about. And to be honest, it's often the one that has to be resubmitted for changes. It's a skill you need to learn, and for many trainees they feel a serious lack of knowledge of grammar terminology. So if you feel this way, my Grammar for Language Teachers course has helped thousands of trainees and it's recommended by centres all over the world. Just saying. The big question, can AI help with this assignment? The main thing to understand is that it can't do it for you, and it's still useful to use more traditional reference sources as well. A dictionary for vocabulary and a reference book like Murphy or Parrott or Swan for grammar structures, for example. AI can give you a lot of help, but it can also get confused with the language of the context. So let me walk you through a couple of examples and we'll see. Here's an item of vocabulary, pension. Let's assume we want to analyse this for teaching purposes in the context of, my dad worked as a farmer for most of his life, but he retired when he was 60 and started to draw his pension. This is what a dictionary will give you: meaning, the form and the pronunciation. It tells us it's a B2 level word, gives us a clear definition that we can turn into concept check questions. We've got the pronunciation here with the stress and the phonemic transcription, and the form here. It's a countable noun, and here are some common collocations. Let's see what AI gives us in terms of meaning, form and pronunciation. I asked Gemini first, and as you can see, it gives us these and a lot of other information. Some parts of this are definitely more helpful than others. So as I said before, you need to approach the information critically. It gives us a definition, okay, but I'm not sure that in their golden years is so great, and I wouldn't include it for learners. It does give us alternative meanings though, and I can see that the boarding house one is useful to consider as it's a false friend in a lot of European languages. ChatGPT gives the same thing, but it also includes some teaching tips that personally I think are a bit dodgy. If you look at these ideas, they fall into the same traps that CELTA trainees often do. They're explaining the concept of a pension as if the person you were teaching it to didn't know what one was. Now, your adult learners do know what a pension is. They know it's important to plan for the future. They just don't know what the word for it is in English. In terms of the form, Gemini tells us that the noun is the most common form, and also gives us a verb form that I think is rather unusual. I can see to pension someone off, but I think to pension is pretty unusual, and I wouldn't include it in a language analysis. Like the dictionary, it gives us related words: pensioner, yes, and pensionable. I think I'd only use that in the expression pensionable age. ChatGPT is more straightforward, tells us it's a noun, not whether it's countable or not, and it also includes its etymology, which is definitely not needed in a language analysis. Moving on to the pronunciation, ChatGPT gives us a simple transcription, great, but then this huge amount of linguistic information that's just not needed for this assignment. Gemini doesn't give us a transcription here, but you can prompt it to do it later. And it suggests practicing similar words like tension. But according to the Cambridge Dictionary and my intuition, this is also a B2 level word, so they might not know it. I asked Gemini to give me concept check questions for pension and got this response. I think this first one is really useful, but the next one could easily be misleading. Is the person on the beach just relaxing? Do they have to be getting a pension? The next ideas are quite helpful. These are words which could be confused, but the other questions don't seem so good to me, although some could work. What do you think? I hate the bonus idea. How are you supposed to act that out? Don't do it. I asked ChatGPT to do the same, and this is what I got. And although it's maybe over-egging the pudding, these definitely cover the meaning of pension. Let's try with a grammar structure. Here's an example. I've been really busy this year. It's true. The present perfect for unfinished time. The being busy is still true now. Oh yes, but the time is ongoing. We're still in this year. If we look in a grammar book like Parrot, we get potential difficulties with the meaning and the form, and he tells us how to form the tense. This does, of course, make the assumption that you know what the tense is called. If you don't, you might think AI could help with that, so let's try it. This was my first attempt, and although it's got the right meaning, it's actually misidentified the tense. I asked it again, and it got it right, but I think this is another lesson in don't take everything it says at face value. This time it gave me a much more accurate answer and an explanation that I thought was very user-friendly. For the sake of completeness, I asked Gemini to, this time using the same marker sentence that Parrot uses so that I could compare like to like, and got this, which again, useful and reasonable, but for the pronunciation, it gave me this, which isn't accurate here. Had can be weak, like this, but in this case, it's a past participle, it's the main lexical verb, so it's not weak, it says had. Using reference books also has the advantage that they come from writers with experience of the difficulties faced by learners, so they'll give you other useful information that you might not think to ask. Examples like these rules of thumb that might not always be helpful from Parrot, or this summary of the differences between the present perfect simple and continuous. We need to check meaning. So I asked Gemini first. These are either inaccurate, one of the accidents could be today, or else rather convoluted and not very clear and helpful, I think. ChatGPT did much better with this. CCQ question number 1, though, uses the target language, and number 2 focuses on the context. So neither of those is great. Some of the others, though, are sensible and useful. And as with all of this, as I keep saying, you have to take a critical approach. Moving on, as part of the language-related task and of your teaching practice, you'll often be asked to analyse functional language, a piece of language that fulfills a particular purpose in the language, advising, persuading, expressing likes, things like that. These functional exponents, as they're called, are often phrases, so they're less easy to look up in a dictionary or a grammar book, and AI can be really helpful here. I gave ChatGPT and Gemini the task of analysing how about going for a drive, and this is what I got. Mostly pretty useful. Note that whatever you ask as concept check questions, Gemini seems to automatically throw this up as a bonus, and it's usually ridiculous. The overall message here is that AI can give you really useful information about analysing language, but you're going to have to be a bit careful about what you choose to use. So checking your information from AI against a grammar book or a dictionary will help you to make sure that your information's accurate, and also it'll widen your understanding of the forms that you're analysing, so that's good. Remember, you also need to cite all sources you use, whether that's grammar books, dictionaries, AI, and with the latter in particular, you need to share the link to the chat and maybe screenshots of the relevant parts of the chat to show you haven't simply cut and pasted things. Here are some ideas for how AI can help you with the focus on the learner assignment. This is the one where you do a needs analysis for a learner or a group of learners and then look at what some of their language problems are and give some ideas to help. You can see a walkthrough of this assignment here. It might be helpful to watch that first. Okay, are you ready? Let's look at the case where you interview a particular learner. In part 1, you give some informational background about the learner that's relevant to their language learning history and needs. You really need to do this on your own. I can't see how AI could help very much, in honesty. In the next part, you're looking at their linguistic strengths and weaknesses, so you need to observe them in teaching practice to see how strong different skills are: reading, writing, speaking, listening, and what kind of activities they prefer. You're also going to record a short interview with them and get them to do some writing so that you can analyse their language strengths and needs. One thing that technology can really help with here is in transcribing the interview. Having it written down isn't mandatory in most centres, but it'll make it much easier for you to spot the errors that they're making. There are lots of speech-to-text apps such as Otter AI or Turbo Scribe, and they'll give you a good approximation that you can then edit. Remember, this won't help you to identify errors in pronunciation though. You'll have to listen out for those. When you've got the transcript or the learner's written work, you could put it into AI and ask it to identify the most important language errors. It will do this, but be careful, it isn't always very accurate and it doesn't always prioritise what would likely be the most important errors. So again, treat what it says with caution. Check it against your own intuition, against other reference books, such as Learner English. While we're on the subject of Learner English, this book is the one that's usually recommended for this assignment, and it's great. But of course, it doesn't have every language in the world in it. So another way that AI can be helpful is if your learner's language isn't in this book, ask what are the biggest difficulties for people learning English coming from that particular language. AI does a useful job of this. This is what it gave me for Italian. And it'll also give you ideas for how to address these, but make sure that you're not just blindly parroting what the AI told you. You need to look at the issues that your learner has, not just that any speaker of their first language has. In the final part of the assignment, you have to choose some material that would be useful for your learner based on the issues that you identified in part 2. You could ask AI to suggest some activities here, but a lot of centres ask you to specifically find published material. And I think actually this is more useful because it's what you have to do in the classroom. And getting more familiar with where to find things like this is super helpful. So I hope here are some ideas on how it can help you with your lessons from the classroom assignment. You can see a walkthrough of this assignment here, and it's the one where you have to reflect on your progress through the course, your strengths and your action points, and how you can address them in the future and continue to develop. This is a very personal assignment. In some ways, it's the easiest of the 4, but in many ways, it's the most important. It's difficult to see how AI can help with such a very personal topic, but it can be a helpful brainstorming partner. Try inputting your feedback from your most recent teaching practice into it and ask how you should focus on these areas. Some of the ideas it comes up with for sure will be nonsense, but some of them will resonate with you. So choose the ones that do. As with all of this, you need to choose critically and describe why you feel this will be helpful. For example, where teaching pronunciation was an action point, resources for this were shown here. I'm not sure how the interactive phonemic chart would be helpful for planning. You could use it to develop your own knowledge of the symbols, I suppose. Mark Hancock's book, on the other hand, would definitely be a good source for games and activities to include in your class to improve your pronunciation teaching. Don't forget that in this assignment you need to make reference to the feedback you've had from peers as well as tutors and aspects of the teaching observations that have helped you, whether that's on video or from watching experienced teachers or from your peer observation. AI definitely can't help you here, I'm afraid. A part of the assignment that could be helped by AI is again as a brainstorming tool to give you ideas for resources to help you develop after the course. If you ask this question, a whole range will come up, including methodology and resource books, teachers' associations, and other useful things. As always, be critical about what you choose and transparent about citing and reporting it. So that's about it for this series, and I hope it's been helpful. Good luck with all of your assignments, and remember, a critical and transparent approach will mean that you're able to use the power of AI, both in your assignments and in an ongoing way in your teaching career. And you might also find my AI-powered language teaching helpful in that case, so check it out on my site. Good luck with it all, and see you on the inside.